He's Assistant Athletic Director of Athletic Performance at Oklahoma State, and we're super excited to have him also share some of his wisdom to help some of the younger strength coaches in the audience learn what it takes to become successful in this profession. So, Coach, if you could share a little bit about how you got into strength conditioning and what led you to the profession, and what strength and conditioning looked like, the picture of strength and conditioning when you started in this profession.
Well, that's a great question, John. First of all, when I first started in strength and conditioning, actually I was working as a graduate assistant on the field back in 1984, 1985. Part of the graduate assistant's responsibilities was to help our strength coach. At that time, John Stuckey was our strength coach. I was very fortunate to get the opportunity to get some exposure to a guy that really is truly a legend in this profession. But that opportunity to go into the weight room during the winter program and during the summer as a graduate assistant helping John really led me to the passion and truly getting the opportunity to affect our guys and our athletes on a daily basis. So that was primarily kind of how I evolved into the strength and conditioning field.
And as far as, if you could share maybe a little bit about what the picture or the landscape of strength and conditioning is like today compared to when you started. And you know, I just as an example, I know that there were, I believe, 208 people that sat for the certification exam yesterday.
Correct.
And congratulations to all of you who have gone through the mentorship and became certified, but very, very different back in the mid-'80s, correct?
Extremely different. Shorthanded would probably be the first thing that comes to mind. Now, the evolution of strength staffs and the focus, multi-sport, dedication, and trying to really evolve in many disciplines and training, the evolution's huge. Back then, when I first started as a head strength coach at Oklahoma State, I had one assistant, and we were trying to cover all the sports. So we do a much greater job and a much better job today than we did back then.
So a young strength coach today potentially could be a graduate assistant for football or one of the 5 and go through their whole career and never have had an opportunity to train any other sport. So give me your thoughts on that. Is that something for some of the young strength coaches, is that something that you would recommend for their career path, or is it advantageous to have an opportunity to work with other sports? And then if you are a young strength coach that maybe is working with a sport outside of volleyball, maybe if you could talk about how you cross over if you want an opportunity then to work with football. I know there's a lot there, but that's kind of the landscape of what we're dealing with right now.
Correct. To me, it's the profession's extremely difficult, especially for young strength coaches trying to break into the field. Areas that I try to encourage our staff and our young interns is to get as much exposure as you can. You really don't want to kind of put yourself into a position where you're not marketable. So I think trying to be multifaceted, gaining as much exposure as you can to many sports and how to train those sports in a very precise manner only makes you more marketable. So truly, to me, if I'm just starting out, I would really try to gain as much exposure as I can. So I try to encourage some of our crew to go spend time with other sports when they're training, just to have an understanding of how that's working.
So other than, to me, especially when you walk through here, you see all of the technology. Outside of the technology, what would you say has changed the most in strength and conditioning during the last 30 years?
Well, probably the biggest thing, I really feel like when I first started, our task or our challenge as a strength coach was, really just try to improve their bench press, their power clean, their squat. Really was just, at that point in time, just trying to increase the strength of your athlete. And now today, with it being very highly competitive, You see, we wear so many more hats. I really believe that just the comprehensive approach to developing a well-rounded athlete is so much more involved than just actually maybe getting under a bar, working on your power clean or your bench or your squat. Now we're talking about speed development, eye-hand coordination, just mental, the ability mentally to dial in and focus. Just so many areas that are being addressed now through nutrition, lots of different components. So over the years, it's just become a very multifaceted, I guess, if you will, profession.
So with that being said, how do you stay up on all this? What are some techniques or what strategy do you use to stay on the cutting edge of the profession, to learn about the technology that's available, to learn about different recovery and different modalities and things that are available that are changing and evolving and coming up every day? And then along with that, you have to determine what's a fad, what's going to come and go, and what really has merit.
Very true. I think the biggest thing for me, really the advent of the internet and the computer has greatly enhanced my ability to do research. Prior to the internet, you had to spend more time maybe going out and visiting people that you felt like were experts in that specific element that you wanted to look at. And now with the advent of the internet, you can do a much greater job as far as research and staying on top of those things and trying to decipher what necessarily is applicable to your program and what you can utilize and maybe what isn't. But I would probably say the biggest thing is just trying to stay abreast of what's going on is very important. You can't really just get yourself tucked away in an area. You've got to stay on top of it. And thankfully, I have a great staff, so I rely on them as probably as much as anybody, especially the younger crew. They're technologically, they're very sound in things, and they can really help me. So I have to rely on the youth sometimes to help me with the computer, but it's a great resource.
So speaking about your staff, and actually see a few of your staff here, could you share a little bit about your staff development and how you groom your young student assistants, graduate assistants, and then help them go on to other programs? And there's a lot involved with that as far as staff unity and grooming them to be able to go out on their own.
Correct. I think one thing for me, I try to, first when I try to hire, is try to find somebody that's an expert in whatever that field is that they're feeling, what that role is. Try to find somebody that really has a great understanding within that sport. That's been big for me in the hiring process. I really didn't want to hire people that kind of thought like I thought. I think it's important to be very holistic and well-rounded, that I find people that maybe look at things a little bit different. So for me, that was big. But for us as a staff, we try to give everybody an opportunity once a year to do some type of educational experience. And it's a little bit difficult now because it's so many sports for everybody to kind of do the same thing. So now it's much more individual based, as far as giving somebody an opportunity to go visit an elite soccer program, or maybe somebody that's doing something within the basketball world that they want to go check on. So I think it's important for your staff to stay current and to try to stay on the cutting edge.
As far as relationships with your student athletes, I've seen an interview and read a couple articles where one of your student athletes or former student athletes specifically thanked you and attributed a lot of their success to spending time with you and you motivating them. And could you talk a little bit, please, about the relationship that you with the student athlete and how you're able to get the best out of everyone? I mean, there are some people that obviously gravitate to it and they love to train, and there are others that it's a little bit more difficult to motivate them. So what are some of the techniques that you use to get the most out of each individual?
Well, I think first of all, every athlete's hot button's a little bit different, so you've got to spend some time individually with each athlete when they come on board and try to figure out kind of what motivates them, what drives them, kind of where they're coming from. I'm fortunate that part of the staff development, putting our staff together, I was able to hire a couple of our strength coaches that really spend a lot of time really getting close to the athletes and getting in depth with them and understanding kind of where they're at. And I've got a couple of those guys here today, and their biggest task is really to try to just connect with the athlete and try to get an understanding of where they're coming from. We kind of call it our cowboy culture, if you will, trying to get our kids to understand and come together closer. So through that information from all the staff members, it helps me to understand kind of that hot button, if you will, what drives and what motivates each athlete and kind of where they're coming from. For years, I used to have a hard time because everybody didn't see the things the same way I did, and I didn't understand that. You know, athletes are changing, the millennial athlete's different, and try to understand kind of how they think and how they view from a motivational perspective. So it's important for me to have a staff that's well-rounded and connects culturally with all the athletes.
Thank you. Coach Manny spoke about the hours and the grind. The reality is that the grind that this position can be, the demands of your time, and I know that you have a family. Could you share a little bit about how you have the work-life balance, some of the challenges of that, and some recommendations on how to achieve that balance?
Well, probably if you were to ask my wife early, she would tell you I didn't do a very good job because I was just locked in, you know, the old school way, more is better. So I spent tremendous hours at the facility and probably didn't do a very good job balancing. But one thing that I have learned over the years, now as you start to put things in perspective, that it's really important to keep that balance and to try to plan your day, your week, your month, and make sure you have those slots dedicated to spend time with your family. And I think it makes me and helps me to be a better strength coach because now I've got some of that balance where before it was just kind of, you know, task-oriented and just one task into the next and probably didn't have a lot of balance. So I would really recommend to the young strength coaches to have that balance. You know, for so long, and we've done a lot of research and talked to a lot of coaches that have achieved success at a very high level, and they'll talk about the many sacrifices that they gave up trying to achieve that highest pinnacle, and now to go back after they've actually achieved it, they realize that probably that there was some sacrifices along the way they wish they hadn't given up or haven't not spent time with their family as much as they probably should have. So it's tough, I know, because we're all very driven, we're all very success-oriented, we're goal-oriented, we want to achieve the highest level, but it's very important to keep that balance. And I think it helps to have a better harmony within your staff when you have that balance.
For sure. So if you could share with us what you love most about your profession, about strength and conditioning, and then kind of a two-sided question or a two-part question, what would you say is your biggest challenge or your biggest frustration?
Well, probably first of all, the greatest reward for me is to actually just see our young men have success, and it doesn't necessarily have to be on the field. Sometimes we'll have young men that come into our program or young women, and they're just trying to get their bearings and trying to get themselves grounded. And just when they walk out the door, when they've got their degree, and you know that, hey, they've become a success story. So those are some of the things that I really relish the most. A lot of times it's not necessarily the victories, it's just as much seeing somebody who's maybe come in and had some difficulties, and now when they walk out the door, they're a success story. And for me, our biggest goal for us at Oklahoma State is we want not only to achieve as much success on the field as we can, but our biggest goal is for our athletes that when they sit in front of that interview, or when they go on that interview and sit in front of that CEO, that when they walk away from that interview, that CEO is going, I want to hire that person, they're impressive. So we're really trying to develop the total athlete at Oklahoma State. It's kind of how we approach things. So for me, that's big when one of our guys comes back and has got a family and things are successful and he's kind of got his bearings going the right way. Those are the big things for me. The big challenge probably, I think, is to try. Everybody's different, so sometimes it's difficult. Some victories are smaller, some are larger, but in the end, if we can help somebody to better their situation, that's big for us.
Great. I'm going to go ahead and open it up for some questions from the audience. We have Rachel who has a mic. Anybody that has a question for Coach Glass? How about somebody from his staff that knows him well? Oh, we got right here. Okay.
Well, Coach, it's obvious that you've embraced new technology and new things, but how do you keep the foundation of the bread and butter, the things that have gotten you to be successful where you are? How do you continue to have that as a focal point of what you do while still evolving with the new trends?
That's a great question, and I really think a lot of times today as I look at other people and some of the younger strength coaches, I really have a concern we get away from what I always tell our staff all the time, I call it the meat and potatoes. Our power clean, our squatting, our pressing movements. Sometimes we get so intrigued with all the other movements and things that are going on, and I really believe, I'm glad primarily that I work with football more hands-on, because I really feel that with that sport, it's intrinsic that you have to do that. But I try to tell all of our strength coaches as they design their programs, don't get away from the meat and potatoes, because ultimately that's where what we're trying to do is increase our power and our speed. But it's tough. And then from the technology side, it's easy for me to answer because I'm not really that technologically well-rounded, I guess, so it's easier for me to stay away from that. But some of the younger guys, they do a great job. But it's important to have a balance, and I just talked about that with some guys this morning. With all that's coming down the pipe with, the athlete tracking and all the different metrics that are out there, and you go into a staff meeting and you give your report and you're telling what's going on, I really think sometimes in the world of sports, you can get away from kind of where you need to be because you get so caught up in all the things that maybe have a little more fancy, if you will, to them. So I try to keep that balance, but it's difficult. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but I just think you have to just try to stick with the meat and potatoes of what our fundamental foundation of our organization and our profession is.
So along with that, Coach, would you say that through your 32 years, your philosophy, your approach has evolved, or those meat and potatoes have been the foundation? What would you say?
I think there's been an evolution, but we still have our core meat and potatoes that when we put a program together, that's the fundamental foundation of where we start every day with what we have. And from there, the ancillary movements and things, there's some evolution there. Okay. But it's tough. It's tough because you see a lot of people that are having success with some of the other stuff. And I'm probably just an old school guy. So, I mean, for me, that's kind of where we're at. But I think it's important to have an awareness. And I try to tell all of our staffers when they go into talk to their different specific sport coaches, when they're given the different reports that refer to the athlete tracking and those different metrics. The biggest thing is I try to tell our coaches, when you give that information, I like to believe it's just create an awareness. We're just trying to create an awareness with you that this is what we've seen with the athlete, okay? And we're not going to sit here and say that verbatim, this is exactly what will happen. So it's really just about creating an awareness with those different metrics.
Another question?
Coach Glass, how do you deal with the athletes that put themselves in the witness protection program, that like to hang out in the training room for overextended periods? How do you typically go about addressing those types of situations?
Well, everyone's kind of unique. I think the most important thing, years ago, there was always a little bit of a kind of a rub between the training room and the strength program. And one thing I learned over the years, the most important thing for us to do is build a great bond with the athletic trainer. And then when you have that bond, you won't have those issues because you guys will work together. So our athletic trainer, he and I sit down every morning and we'll review every athlete that may be in that type of situation. So we already know on the front end how we're going to handle things so they don't try to work one against the other. So I think the relationship is really critical. And I know sometimes there's challenges, but I really think that if you'll work to embrace that connection, it'll help with a lot of those situations.
Somebody else from the audience?
I've got a question. Me. Coach Glass, when you're looking to hire new staff, what are you looking for in them?
Okay, so for me, when we get, I'm sure Coach Manny's the same way. I get a lot of emails, a lot of resumes, a lot of applications. Probably the very first thing, and I know Coach Manny hit on it last year, and I thought it was very important for all the young strength coaches. I look to see if it's personalized. You can look at an email and go, okay, well, that's just a general mass email, or is it? So if you're really serious, you want to personalize it, and then you know it's specific, and then you know there was some time and attention to detail spent with it. That's kind of the very first rung to get through. Then from there, I like to find and look for people that have a willingness to work, and they've already taken the initiative to try to broaden their knowledge just through exposures. They're not afraid to go out and try to get some exposure in different areas. And then ultimately, I would always tell everybody, this conference is so phenomenal from a networking standpoint, because ultimately that's what it comes down to. I really believe, for me, most of the hires, it'll still come down to somebody calling me or me calling someone that I know that they've worked with. So I can't impress upon all y'all the networking component, shaking hands, meeting people, not being afraid to introduce yourself, and making that connection. Because I was probably the worst. I'm not necessarily a real social person, but I learned the hard way. You've got to get out and you've got to network, and you've got to introduce yourself and do those things. And then the big thing to me is follow up with a handwritten letter, not an email, not something that's standardized that you sent to everybody, but I think our society today has gotten around just a handwritten note. Sometimes those things will resonate with me when it comes back time for that hire. Yes. Yeah.
Anyone else from the audience? Is there any other advice that you would give a young strength coach that's a graduate assistant, but they're looking for that first head job? Or, sorry, their first full-time job?
Well, I think I just hit on some of that, but I think the big thing is you may have to take a couple steps laterally before you get to where you want to go. Sometimes everybody's kind of focused on the finish line and what they want to do, but a lot of people I've talked to in different that have succeeded in this profession of making a couple lateral moves here and there before they got to where they kind of wanted to go. And don't be afraid to do that, I think. And the big thing is gain as much knowledge as an exposure as you can. Sometimes you think it may not be applicable to the field or the sport that you really want to dial into, but it all kind of dials together, if you will.
So, Coach, you've been extremely fortunate that you have been really at two schools, two different terms at Oklahoma State, but that's pretty rare. Most coaches or people within the coaching world with 32 years of experience have traveled to a number of different places. Is that something that you, by design, have wanted to stay in one place, or is it something that you would like? And I'm sure that there's no doubt in my mind you've had the opportunity to move on to other places, whether it be the NFL. And why have you decided to stay where you are?
Well, I think the big thing is you have to define what drives you, and everybody's dynamics are a little bit different, whether you have a family or don't have a family. For me, it was important to come back to Stillwater and raise my boys in the community of Stillwater. But everybody's dynamics and challenges are different. I think the big thing is as this profession grows, and trust me, this profession has grown immensely in 32 years, from the one strength coach and a graduate assistant to, we have a staff of about 12 now, which is probably maybe a little on the high end, but there's a lot larger staffs. But it's a growing profession, and the way the NCAA is unfolding and the time management, things like that, it's only going to grow more. But I think being flexible and the ability to be mobile probably makes things a little bit easier for you. For me, that's a little bit unique to have only been at 2 spots. I think probably Ken and I are probably we're probably rare, I guess. Yeah. So, but I think the ability to be mobile and flexible will enhance your ability to find that opportunity you're looking for.
Right. Anyone else in the audience? Coach, thank you very much. This is outstanding. Really appreciate your time, your wisdom, and thanks for all you've done.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate you all. Thank you.